want to keep any of you guys waiting.
I have a Swiss gene that it's really giving me tough time in my own life.
Yeah. Oh, well, you know, the one thing that Asian kids are taught is punctuality, so that I try for that. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Nickolay Mladenov, the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, briefed the Security Council by videoconference on the Israeli-Palestinian situation and said the past month has witnessed the continuing deterioration of the situation on the ground. With no prospect of final status negotiations on the horizon, he said, facts on the ground continue to deteriorate, pushing us ever further from a viable two-state solution. Mr. Mladenov warned that violence continues to be a major part of the day-to-day reality of the conflict. However, he added, in recent weeks, we have seen a welcome reduction of violence in Gaza and the launching of rockets, and agreements for calm brokered by the UN and Egypt continue to hold. Despite the overall improvement, he said, 3 Palestinians were killed by the Israeli Defense Forces and over 500 injured during protests at the Gaza perimeter fence. The Special Coordinator told the Security Council that we can no longer continue to address Gaza's critical needs on a month-to-month basis, while failing to confront the broader political reality, including the stiffening closures, violence, and lack of unity. Similarly, he said, we also can no longer disregard the cracks emerging in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Settlement construction and expansion continues, the Palestinian Authority faced financial crisis is not fully resolved, and the economy continues to stagnate. Geir Peterson, the Special Envoy for Syria, spoke to the press in Geneva today, and he noted that as he was speaking, the 150 members of the Constitutional Committee are arriving in Geneva. He said that the Constitutional Committee talks will begin on Wednesday, and added that the agreement to establish the Constitutional Committee marks the first political agreement between the government of Syria and the opposition. He said that the Constitutional Committee commits the government and the opposition and their nominees to sit together face-to-face in dialogue and negotiations, and also create spaces for the voices of civil society to be heard. And it could be a door opener to a broader political process. Mr. Peterson stressed, however, that the Constitutional Committee alone cannot and will not resolve the Syrian conflict. For that, he said, concrete and tangible progress is needed on other aspects of Security Council Resolution 2254, as well as meaningful progress on the ground. And the UN remains deeply concerned for the safety and protection of hundreds of thousands of civilians in northeast Syria, following reports of sporadic fighting. Some 106,000 people remain displaced, of the over 180,000 previously reported. The UN continues to call on all parties to exercise maximum restraint and reiterates that the only sustainable solution to the conflict is a UN-facilitated, political, negotiated solution among all parties, which respects Syria's unity and territorial integrity, the legitimate concerns of neighboring countries, and the diversity of the Syrian population. The UN continues to call for an immediate de-escalation and urges all parties to resolve their conflict concerns through peaceful means. Over the weekend, the Secretary General Special Representative for Iraq, Janine Hennis-Plasschaert, deeply regretted and condemned the further loss of life and injuries in Iraq and strongly denounced the destruction of public and private property. She also expressed grave concerns about armed entities seeking to hinder Iraq's stability and unity, undermining the people's right to peaceful assembly and their legitimate demands. The Special Representative reiterated that implementing the many measures announced by the government in recent weeks will take time. A constructive dialogue on the way forward is in the interest of all, she said. The Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, was in Sudan this weekend to meet with the authorities, including the Prime Minister and senior women government officials. Earlier today, Ms. Mohammed also traveled to Darfur. At the conclusion of her visit to the country, she tweeted that the UN and partners stand ready to respond to Prime Minister Hamdok's call to join Sudan as the country comes together to rebuild and restore the values of human coexistence and social cohesion for peace and development. To succeed, she added, women's leadership will be critical today and tomorrow. Her trip to Sudan came on the heels of a one-week solidarity mission with the African Union to highlight issues linked to women, peace, and security in the Horn of Africa. That mission took her to Ethiopia, Somalia, Djibouti, and Eritrea. The Deputy Secretary General is expected back in New York tomorrow. And now, turning to Mali, we've learned with sadness that over the weekend, a UN peacekeeper from Togo has succumbed to injuries he sustained on October 6th in Bandiagara in the Mopti region. when the MINUSMA temporary base was attacked by unidentified assailants. He was seriously injured in the attack and evacuated to a hospital in Dakar, where he received medical treatment. We extend our deepest condolences to his family, the government, and the people of Togo. The Secretary General's Special Representative for Somalia, James Swan, met yesterday with President Sayed Abdullah Deni and members of his cabinet in Garowe, the capital of Puntland State. Mr. Swan said the visit was another welcome opportunity for him to hear firsthand from Puntland's leadership about the progress being made with its ambitious agenda. He congratulated Puntland's leaders for the recent successful investment conference and the start of the Ethiopian Airlines flights to Garowe, noting that these developments were positive signals of economic revival in Puntland. More on his visit online. Also on Somalia, seasonal rains have started early in many parts of the country and have led to flooding in the states of Hirshabelle, Jubaland, and the southwest. Over 180,000 people are estimated to have been displaced thus far. Farmland, infrastructure, and roads have been destroyed and livelihoods disrupted in some of the worst-hit areas. South Sudan is also affected by severe seasonal flooding that has devastated large areas of the country since July. An estimated 900,000 people are affected, including internally displaced people, refugees, and their host communities. The rains are likely to continue for another 4 to 6 weeks and will put more people at risk. The heavy rains have hit areas that were already facing high humanitarian needs. Considerable damages to crops, arable land, and livestock are anticipated. In both countries, humanitarian partners are working to scale up their response capacity. To support the government of Zambia, the UN and humanitarian partners have launched a 7-month humanitarian response plan to address rising humanitarian needs triggered by the poorest rainfall season since 1981 in the southern part of the country. More than 2.4 million people out of a total population of some 17 million are expected to be severely food insecure during the lean season, which goes from October to March 2020, with at least 430,000 people in emergency levels. In response to this crisis, the UN and international NGOs are seeking $89.5 million to provide immediate humanitarian assistance and early recovery support for 2.3 million people for 7 months. The main portion of this plan is for food assistance. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that they are deeply concerned by the impact of stepped-up fighting in Myanmar's Rakhine state, where civilians have been caught up in an escalation of fighting between the Myanmar military and the Arakan army in Ratadong township in recent days. Human rights violations and abuses continue to be reported. Some 32,000 people remain displaced in Rakhine and Shin states, and this is in addition to the 128,000 internally displaced people, mostly Rohingya, who remain in camps in Rakhine state, many for more than 7 years. Insecurity and access restrictions across much of Rakhine state are impeding humanitarian organizations to assess and respond to the needs of affected people. The UN calls on all parties to the conflict to adhere to international humanitarian law and ensure the protection of civilians and facilitate timely access to people in need. The humanitarian response plan for this year seeks $214.4 million to assist some 1 million people in need in Myanmar. That plan is 78.5% funded so far. For her part, the Secretary General's Special Envoy, Christine Schreiner-Bergener, has repeatedly expressed her concern over how the clashes between the Arakan army and the Myanmar military have exacerbated the precarious situation in Rakhine, one of the nation's poorest regions. The International Solidarity Conference on the Venezuelan refugee and migrant crisis started today in Brussels. Co-hosted by the European Union, together with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and the International Organization for Migration, this conference aims to mobilize support and to demonstrate solidarity of the international community to the affected host countries. It is estimated that so far, approximately 4.5 million Venezuelans have fled as a result of the political turmoil, socio-economic instability, and humanitarian crisis in their country. The international community is actively involved in supporting the host countries bearing the burden of the refugee and migrant crisis. On Friday afternoon, we issued the announcement that the Secretary General has appointed David McLaughlin-Carr of Australia as his Deputy Special Representative in the UN Organization Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or MONUSCO. He will also serve as UN Resident Coordinator and Humanitarian Coordinator in the DRC. His bio is online. Yesterday was World Day for Audiovisual Heritage. The General Conference of UNESCO approved the commemoration of this observance in 2005 as a mechanism to raise general awareness of the need to preserve and safeguard important audiovisual material for coming generations, and for urgent measures to be taken to conserve this heritage and ensure it remains accessible to the public now and in the future. In a special message to the World Radio Communications Conference that is taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, the Secretary General highlighted how radio communication technology has transformed information sharing, revolutionized industries, saved lives, and advanced development. He pointed out that technologies such as 5G, high-altitude platform stations, and satellite communications offer great promise to help close the digital divide and advance the Sustainable Development Goals. And tomorrow at 10 a.m., there will be a press briefing by the President of the International Court of Justice, Judge Abdulqawi A. Yusuf, who will brief you on the court's role and jurisdiction, its latest activities, and an overview of its current caseload. That is it for me. Yes, Edie.
Thank you, Farhan. Does the Secretary General have any reaction to the United States' announcement about the death of the head of the Islamic State, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi?
Yeah, we've taken note of the announcement by the President of the United States on the death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of the UN-designated terrorist group Daesh. Daesh has committed heinous crimes and brought tragedy and death to thousands of men, women, and children. And we should take this moment to remember the victims and families of victims of terrorism everywhere in the world. Yes, Mr. Sato.
Thank you, Farhan. Like Secretary General expressed,
I can't quite hear the microphone. Maybe try again.
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear? Okay, thank you. So, like you said, that the situation in Iraq. So, like Secretary General expressed concern last week, the demonstration all over the world is very concerning, especially Iraq. They are causing many more deaths, like you said. So, what is UN able to do for alleviate the situation on the ground?
Well, you've seen that Ms. Hennis Plasschaert spoke out over the weekend about the situation, and she and her colleagues in the UN mission, UNAMI, are working with the authorities to see what can be done to calm down the situation. For the Secretary General's part, I can say that he deeply regrets the terrible loss of life and injuries over the past days in Iraq, and expresses his deep condolences to the victims and their families. The Secretary General reiterates his appeal for nonviolence and for restraint by the authorities and other actors involved in full accordance with international standards. He urges the government of Iraq to investigate all incidents thoroughly and transparently and ensure that the perpetrators are brought to justice without delay. Yes, Joe.
First, a follow-up to Edie's question. You said the Secretary General took note of the successful U.S. special ops operation resulting in the death of al-Baghdadi. It's a rather peculiar phrase. I mean, wouldn't he commend and the operation and the result and see it as a positive? So that's my first question. That's a follow-up. Second question has to do with UNRWA. This mandate is up for renewal, I guess later on this autumn, by the General Assembly. Could you give us a current status report on the internal investigation of the alleged corruption at the top of UNRWA's management? Thank you.
On your second question, the report is still being worked on. We don't have any results to share with you, but it is being done as expeditiously as possible. Regarding the choice of verb, the basic point is that yes, this is one of the events that we've taken note of. We've made very clear that any progress against Daesh is to be welcomed. The Secretary General and the many branches of the UN, including our offices dealing with political affairs, with counterterrorism and others, have repeatedly urged all member states to work together in the fight against Daesh, and any progress against them is to be commended. Yes, Betul.
Thank you, Farhan. UN reporter Agnes Kalamard said that she was expecting the Secretary General to take a stand on the killing of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, And she said she was disappointed that the Secretary General did not take the opportunity she provided with the report she had prepared. She also says that she's not asking for the establishment of an international tribunal, but a panel of experts. And she says she believes that the Secretary General doesn't need a mandate to form a panel of experts. What is your response to that?
I believe we've said this many times over the past year, but our view is that, in fact, such a mandate is needed, and we have repeatedly tried to see whether any member states would try to provide that. As you know, there are different bodies of member states that could create a mandate for such an inquiry, and they have not done so. Yes, Abdulhamid, did you have?
Thank you, Farhan. My first question is that the Palestinian Authority closed down 59 web accounts, and it was mentioned by Mladenov. Did the SG or any of his representatives speak with the PA about the closing of these 59 web accounts?
Well, Mr. Mladenov is our envoy on the ground who deals with the Palestinian Authority the most, and he did mention his concerns, and those are shared by the Secretary General. But yes, Mr. Mladenov is the one who's in dialogue.
But did he talk to them? Did he ask them to reconsider their decision, or just took note of it, as you just always say? We took note. Taking note means nothing.
Obviously, we want to make sure that all avenues to freedom of expression are kept open, and that is something that we have conveyed on the ground as well.
The second thing Mr. Mladenov mentioned about the attacks of the settlers, and he used the word incidents. Is that kind of trying to beautify an ugly action of those extremists? No. Why he used the word incidents?
No. I mean, the words we choose are the words we choose. As with taking note and so forth, I know that you sometimes object to how we choose the words we go about, but this is a diplomatic organization, and we choose words with care. That doesn't lessen the amount of concern we have about these acts, which were reported to the Security Council today. Ibtisam.
Follow up on the issue of the statement that the Secretary General issued and read on Friday. It's, as a matter of fact, the statement does not actually reflect the situation on the ground in so many countries. He expressed concern, but he did not condemn any of the killing of civilians in Iraq and in so many different countries. Why is that?
Well, in part because he was trying to talk about the overall phenomenon in country after country. So it was essentially a wide-ranging statement applying to several different circumstances. Each circumstance is different. But obviously, in country after country, the freedom of expression and the right to peaceful protest has to be protected by all institutions. And in all of cases, if civilians are killed, of course that's to be condemned across the board.
No, I have a follow-up. But yeah. You are saying it's, of course, to be condemned, but he didn't do that. I mean, it's not that there were so many people killed in the last month at least, whether in Gaza, whether in Iraq, in different countries. And yet what we hear from him, and when he even made a press conference, it was a stakeout. It wasn't even a press conference where journalists can ask him more. And he's almost absent in his statements. Some statements come 2 days or 3 days after things on the ground happening. So there is not enough reaction from his side compared to what's happening in so many countries of the world.
I'm sorry you feel that we don't have an appropriate and timely response. That is what he's trying for. That's, in fact, why he came before the press on Friday. He did so in full knowledge, both that he could speak at length about what he thinks is a phenomenon happening in many different countries, in many different regions in the world, and he fully expected to take questions about the specific situations, and he took several of those. And so he's trying to express his concerns. Obviously, they vary from country to country because each circumstance is different. But in all of them, He wants to make sure that people's basic rights are protected, and that includes the rights to freedom of expression, peaceful assembly, and peaceful protest.
I have a question on northern Syria.
Can we go
Okay,
around and
sure.
then come back to you? Alan.
Thank you, Farhan. Do you hear me?
Yeah. All right.
Regarding the al-Baghdadi's elimination question, does the Secretary General believe that the statement of the United States is, quite reliable? Doesn't this information has to be checked, double-checked?
Well, we cannot personally verify the accuracy of this. We trust the reliability of the various sources of information that have been speaking up, but obviously any sort of information would need to be verified by the various authorities on the ground. Yes, Edie.
Thank you, Farhan. Last week, the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Palestinian territories asked for the speedy release of the list of businesses, companies doing business in the in Israeli settlements. And I wondered what the status was of that list.
I believe that the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights is considering that issue. Yes, Ibtisam.
On northern Syria, do you have any information regarding ISIS fighters and their families, and what's the update on this issue?
Well, we don't have first-hand reporting on the activities of Daesh in northeastern Syria. I mean, we know about the overall displacement of people, and we've expressed our concerns in terms of the situation in places like Al-Hol camp, where they had been known to be. But we don't have an ability to talk at any great length about the numbers of Daesh people who are going from one place to another.
But do you have any information regarding whether there is an agreement and the details of the agreements between the Turks and the Russians and other parties? Were you informed? Are you about this regarding the two camps with the families of fighters and the fighters in the other camp in northern Syria? Thank you.
Those are not agreements that were reached with or through the United Nations. Of course, we would have concerns to make sure that all the people in locations like Al-Hol are kept safe. Yes, please.
Thank you. You talked about the humanitarian food situation in southern African region from the drought, one of its worst droughts it's ever faced. And also SADC released a statement today where they are saying that currently the whole region, well, some parts, Zambia, Malawi, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe specifically are experiencing a heat wave right now, and that they expect temperatures to escalate into the current agricultural season. So I wanted to find out from you, besides raising or trying to raise money or funds to help with the humanitarian assistance effort, food assistance efforts, is the UN and is some of its agencies working directly with the farmers on programs to try and equip them to maybe plant their crops in light of these climatic changes?
Well, there are UN entities, including specifically the Food and Agriculture Organization, that does try to provide that sort of technical expertise. So they would be doing that. And of course, the added factor is that the presence of these hot, dry conditions is another testament to the need to do more to counter the effects of climate change. Yes. Betul and then Abdul Hamid.
Thank you, Farhan. A follow-up on the foreign ISIS fighters. Does the UN think that the issue of the foreign ISIS fighters should be a matter for only the Iraqis and the Syrians? Or the Secretary General, does the Secretary General believe that those fighters should be repatriated, should be returned to their countries of origin and put on trial?
Well, as you know, the Security Council has adopted resolutions concerning specifically the foreign fighters belonging, the foreign terrorist fighters belonging to Daesh. And so we want to make sure that the Security Council resolutions are fully complied with. Yes.
Thank you again. There was a meeting of the non-aligned movement in Baku, Azerbaijan. Correct me if I'm wrong, the SG did not go there, did not give a speech in this meeting, which is normally he does. Why he didn't go and participate in the non-aligned movement conference?
Well, his schedule, as you know, is quite busy, and he has been going from place to place. I'll see. I believe we sent a representative, but I'll check who attended in his place.
The second thing, there is tension developing between Egypt and Ethiopia now. And according to his policy of preventive diplomacy, did he take any initiative to talk to the parties, try to calm things and find some middle ground to discuss the crisis?
Well, on that, I think I think we've made clear our concerns about the situation at the Renaissance Dam, and what I can say is we've been following the developments regarding negotiations over the Great Renaissance Dam very closely. The UN stands ready to support any process that would lead to a mutually agreeable solution to all parties involved, Ethiopia, Egypt, Sudan, should the parties seek UN assistance. With that, have a good afternoon, everyone.